probably 50% of our helpline inquiries, either by telephone or by email from our members, are based on EICRs. And the initial thing to remember about EICRs is they are a periodic inspection. They're a report. They aren't a certificate.
Welcome to Industry Focus, the latest updates from your ECA experts addressing key member concerns and industry issues.
Welcome, Darren, to the first ECA podcast. Great to have you. Before we jump into EICRs and common questions that you get on the ECA Member Technical Helpline, can you tell us a bit more about yourself, about your background in the industry leading up to your time at the ECA?
Thank you, Omar. It's brilliant to talk about EICRs today. So a bit about me. My name's Darren Crannis. I'm a technical manager here at the ECA. And I've over 15 years experience in the inspection testing sector. So carrying out EICRs from residential homes right up to multi-tier data centers with multiple suppliers and critical supplies. And I'm a member of various committees and other working groups associated with EICRs. And one of those, which may sound familiar to some, is JPEL. And JPEL are responsible for BS 7671, and more specifically, JPEL Subcommittee A or JPEL-A. And that's responsible for verification. So that's Part 6 and Appendix 6, as all aspects of initial verification and periodic inspection is covered within that.
Okay, so EICRs, as a layperson myself, the extent of my knowledge is that it stands for Electrical Installation Condition Report, and it's required every 5 years. Can you expand a bit on that, please, Darren? What are the implications for installers, landlords, maybe housing associations, tenants, etc.?
So it's a really common question. So probably 50% of our helpline inquiries, either by telephone or by email from our members, are based on EICRs. And the initial thing to remember about EICRs is they are a periodic inspection. They're a report. They aren't a certificate. So a very common misconception is they are a certificate. They're not. They're a report. So it's a bit like a surveying report or a home buyer's report. They're a report on the existing installation. And that's a really key point when it comes to EICRs. And yes, they are periodic. They range. They may be every 3 months you need to complete an EICR if you're on construction or a building site. So we're talking high risk, high change.
Okay. So what are the kind of considerations for installers? Do they need a certain set of qualifications?
Yeah, so necessary qualifications, competence, experiences, and importantly, insurances as well. So, and also some of our members may creep into installations that require a different set of skills or insurances. So if they're on to petrochemical forecourts, for example, power stations, so the rise of solar PV and battery storage, they're power plants. So if you are a member and you are carrying out periodic inspection works, if you are crossing over into these installations with some crossover in them, okay, in their power plants or their explosive areas, you may need a different set of skills and qualifications.
So, like you said earlier, a huge number of calls that you get on the ECA Technical Helpline, they are about EICRs. If you could give our audience today one bit of information for them to take away to help with those questions, what would that be?
I think what you need to do is isolate yourself with the remedials. As we said earlier, an EICR is a report. And what's really important is if you focus your mind on just a report, so you're there today, tomorrow, this week, this month, completing a safety report on the installation, if you carve away the remedials, so stop thinking about how am I going to fix this? Just focus on how am I going to document this? How am I going to code this? Don't worry about the remedial action because you may not get the remedials. It may be tendered out. As it's a report, the client doesn't have to take on board what you said. So I think focusing on the here and now and focusing on the task ahead. And a lot of people say, oh, an EICR is a really big task, but actually it's lots and lots of little tasks. So little tasks, clear head, don't worry about the remedial side of things.
And is there a perhaps slightly controversial aspect to EICRs where some of our members will be commissioned to do loads and loads of them? in quick succession. Does that happen, and does that impact the quality maybe of the report?
That does happen in industry. I'd like to think it's down to the individual inspector, how they overcome that or how they deal with that. But an EICR is a professional report. And I think that's really important to say to our members is, take your time while completing an EICR. You're passing an engineering judgment. Don't rush, okay? Complete the report to the best extent you can, okay? There's plenty of coding advice available. So you can pull on resources from, for example, Electrical Safety First, the Best Practice Guide 4. That's a great example where to start your coding off. And give you a time to review the information after, before you sort of sign and seal and deliver that report to your client. This is just as important as a structural survey, shall we say.
How would you recommend that a member push back maybe on a client who might be a bit demanding with the number of EICRs that they're asking for?
I think it's important to address safety. It's okay to have those demands to complete reports in a shorter time. However, when you're completing a report, there's a couple of really important items there. One is the extent. So if you're given a lot of scope, you can really get to grips with that installation. You can really get to know that installation. We talk about inspection and testing. So you get really familiar with that and your sampling will be much higher. If you've got constraints, then your limitations will rise. So that may be okay, but it has to be an acceptable risk by the client. Yes, I can do that in a shorter amount of time. However, the limitations are going to be much more vast. And what you don't want to do is sort of water down these reports to a point where they become almost useless.
Yeah. So getting into a bit more the nitty gritty of an EICR, what are any kind of recommendations that you'd have for, completing the report, maybe storing records for future reference? What are your recommendations?
With your reports, software is great to use. There's a lot of software in the market out there. Pick one that works best for you. Taking photos speak 1,000 words. So if you can, support your reports with photos. I think we all say, keep your records as long as HMRC. So keep them, I guess, for 7 years. If you've got clients that you've had for decades, then building that history is really important, because you might have clients that you're going to come back to in 5 years' time to do a re-inspection, as an example. And having that history and looking at how the installation performed, maybe from new or 5 years ago, will certainly have an impact on your report going forward. So you get a great picture of that. And what you've also highlighted there is the need to keep records. When members go out to electrical installations, records should be there. It's called inspection and testing, and it's based on previous records. If there aren't any records available, then some sort of verification is required before that inspection, and members should have a word with their clients, have a conversation with their clients about performing that verification first before they go into the inspection testing side of things.
Darren, you've mentioned taking photos, proper record keeping. You mentioned software as well. Are there any bits of software that ECA produces that can help support members with EICRs?
Yes, members can always choose their own software for reports or certification, but the ECA has software like ERAMs. So before you go to sites, it's important that you carry out a risk assessment and method statement. So you need a safe system of work while you're conducting inspection testing. There's also ECOM. So we mentioned about competency earlier. So it'd be great to get your operatives inside that software as well, so you'll know you're fully compliant.
Okay, that's great, Darren. So we've looked at EICRs as a report for monitoring the safety of electrical installations periodically. Are there any limitations to EICRs? Any kind of improvements to them that you'd like to see in the future?
Only that they're carried out correctly. I mean, just because we talk about every 5 years, it might be every 3 years, it might be every 3 months. So remember, you can with EICRs, you can support them with other testing methods, such as infrared testing, IR testing, ultrasonic testing, and people really forget visual. So visual inspection is really important. And we miss that aspect. We're all very keen to go and get a test result. However, that's a very small part of it. 80% of EICRs is about your visual senses, rather than conducting those measured tests. So you'll find that a lot of observations are just simply there by walking around a building, looking into places, opening up distribution doors and checking visually what's there, sight, touch, smell, all those senses you need as well, just apart from just carrying out a few tests. But yes, you can supplement this with other tests as well. Infrared testing is really big, as we say. Some people do ultrasonic tests on lampposts, for example, just to see the integrity of those.
Yeah.
So there's no real limits to what you can do, what you can perform in the EICR.
When it comes to coding for faults or recommendations, it sounds like there can be grey areas when it comes to selecting a code. It sounds like it's all based on engineering judgment. Do you have any tips for navigating coding?
So there's a great guide from Electrical Safety First, Best Practice Guide 4, and all the industry is associated with that. We all get involved and we agree those codes there, and also on their professional resources site on the ESF website itself. But in terms of coding, the best person to code an installation is the person carrying out the report and just using their engineering judgments. And I think it's important not to get too involved with that process. So we help guide our members that are maybe between a couple of codes, and we keep things very simple. Is there danger today? Could there be danger tomorrow? Yeah. And does something require improvement? So keeping it really simple, I think, is really important.
So say you're an installer walking around the building, doing the visual checks, observations. Are there any key questions that you as an installer would have in your head that you would apply to every situation?
Yeah, certainly. Normally walking around the building with a client is always, so getting some records beforehand, walking around the building with the client or a clerk of works to see what's changed. Often when things change or change of use, that's a good time to carry out an inspection, because the needs and requirements of that building may change. There might be areas that are being redeveloped, in which case you may not be inspecting those. So often I walk around, get a feel for the building, what it's being used for. So if I went to a house to inspect that, that's a normal domestic use. If I went to a hospital, that's a clinical location. And that requires a lot more questions being asked, really, especially how the wards are being used, how different areas are being used. So it's sort of multi-layered. So really getting an understanding of what the building is being used for will help your decision-making going forward.
Do you have any guidance for installers when it comes to the wording of the forms? Is there a specific way to word EICR forms?
I think it's important, as you said, a lay person has to read this. Okay. As engineers, we're only interested in certain parts, but these reports are being produced for the lay person. So using language that they can understand, and we can help with that. We've got some great guidance on our website, on eca.co.uk/technical. We have some guidance to completing EICRs and the wording that you should use.
Great. Are there any other tips or any answers that you find yourself giving time and again on the helpline when it comes to EICRs?
A lot of it is coding, and we help with that. Like we said, we sort of try and break it down to sort of the three sort of fundamental principles: danger today, danger tomorrow, and improvement recommended. Remember, this is about an installation that should be safe for continued use.
Yeah. So
it doesn't have to be the latest and the greatest. It just has to be safe. And I think that's really important to note as well.
Yeah. So it has to be safe and it has to be up to date. Those are the main factors.
Just has to be safe. Just has to be safe, because there's installations out there installed probably from the 13th and 14th edition. Mm-hmm. So, but what's really important there is change of use.
Right.
Typical examples maybe where you might have, I don't know, just say some dry changing facilities, and then a swimming pool's introduced. So then you have wet changing facilities.
Right.
So the requirements between them are different. And that could happen in the last 5 or 10 years. Again, it's really important that you understand the installation you're going into.
So Darren, on the ECA Technical Helpline, do you get lots of questions about completing EICRs?
No one signs up to be the world's best form filler, but it is really important to get those right. I mean, we're all engineers, we're very clinical, and with EICRs, some of the most important parts are the extent and limitations. We've also got to remember that with EICRs, they're not initial verification, this is periodic. So we're not looking for 100%. And that's really important when it comes down to filling in, the extent and limitations on your forms. And to help members with that, we've got 3 cracking YouTube videos on how to complete certification, minor works, and EICRs. And that's available for members to download.
Great. Thanks, Darren. And for members who want to get in touch with you directly, maybe find out a bit more, where can they do that?
They can call our technical helpline. So that runs 5 days a week and it's manned by a technical manager. So we're there to assist you, or email at technical@eca.co.uk.
Great. Thank you, Darren.